Hello, my darlings. Welcome back to another episode of Potions and Processing with me, your host, Raven White. This week's episode is going to be talking about going no contact with my mom. It has now been 1 year since the last time I sat down and had a full conversation with my mother. Now, it has been a process and it's been a journey of no contact with my mom. And it's been sticky and messy and incredibly emotional. And it's not a cut and dry, it has not been a cut and dry situation for me. So I thought it might be helpful for all of us to kind of sit down and go through what it has looked like for me to go through that process. Because it's different for everybody. It has been interesting reading, listening to other people's stories. I have definitely learned a lot by listening to a lot of people's stories about going no contact with their narcissistic parents. So I thought we could do a little rundown of what it was kind of like growing up with my mom, what our relationship was like as an adult living with my mom, and kind of go from there what our relationship turned into, as I moved out and started my own family, and what kind of led up to our final separation. So to start out with, I am the oldest child. I was the firstborn, and I have a different father than the rest of my siblings. My father's no longer living. He's not part of the... My mother and I always had a rocky relationship. There was always tension between us. I often felt that I couldn't do anything to please her. I couldn't do anything to appease her, to get her to be happy with anything that I did, whether it was extra chores, picking up the slack, making her special gifts, even going so far as to just sucking up, paying her extra compliments, trying to just win her affection no matter what the cost was. This particularly amped up when my siblings started to be born, because then favorites came into play. And it was very clear from the start I was not the favorite, and I never would be. When the siblings started to appear, I was also placed into more of a parental role. Not right away, but definitely as I started getting older, I was pushed out of child mode and into parent role. And I started from a pretty young age to be held responsible for things my siblings was doing. And I think that this happens no matter what. When you are the oldest sibling, you get in trouble for things your siblings are doing. Why weren't you paying attention? Why weren't you watching out? Why would you let your sibling do this thing? Why wouldn't you, stop them from doing something silly? I think that's going to happen regardless. And, I can understand that, like, up to an extent. You do look out for your siblings, and I totally get that. There is a point where that kind of switches over, though, and I was being held responsible for every single thing that my siblings was doing, or at least that's what it felt like to me. I was being punished significantly stricter and much more frequently than my other siblings were. Writing hundreds of sentences, standing hours in corners, going to bed early, being threatened with spankings. Spoilers, they were not just spankings. And it just continued to grow over time. But let's steer back more into the dynamic between me and my mom. I know that she was often, put down and made to feel like a bad mom and a bad person. And I have had to do a lot to untangle myself from feelings of guilt for ever talking negatively about my mom. Because I know that she also has her own trauma, and she had bad things happen to her. And I don't deny that. I don't deny that my mom went through and had bad things happen to her. But it has taken me a lot of time to untangle myself from that, and to still acknowledge that while my mom definitely had bad things happen to her, and things that she did not deserve, and things that I wish that she did not go through, my mom then in turn turned around and put those things onto me. And she treated me badly, and she took those things out onto me. And so it's taken me a long time to be able to acknowledge that, and to be able to say that my mom did a lot of really terrible things to me because she maybe didn't have an outlet or didn't know what to do with them, which is not a good excuse. And I let a lot of things slide for a really long time. I'm going to put a little blip here right now and say that I'm going to be talking about some very uncomfortable topics ahead, and I don't want anyone to be triggered or upset. So if you would not like to listen, you are welcome to fast forward, or you are welcome to opt out now. But these are all kind of tangled together, and I do come back to them, so I will do my best not to be explicit, but it is all part of the story, so unfortunately it is all going to be included. My mom was physically violent with me as a kid, and it's kind of a miracle that she got away with as much as she did, considering how, like, widespread everything got. And we'll get to that eventually. We'll get there, I promise, people. But my mom was very physically violent with me when I was a kid. And maybe she doesn't remember, because I remember having conversations with her, like, as an adult. I came to her asking for questions, and conveniently for her, she doesn't remember. And this seems to be a common theme with narcissistic parents, or with abusive parents in general. Their kids go back and they say, hey, you did this thing to me that was really messed up and impacted me as an adult. And the parents are like, I don't remember that ever happening. I don't remember it ever being like the way that you say that it is. So I don't know. I guess that's just a common thing. But my mom was very physically violent with me when I was a kid. There were lots of broken spoons that were used on me, and a lot of pulling of hair. She would pull my hair and use my hair to pull me and push me, smash me into, like, cupboards. And she was also very, like, emotionally manipulative to, you know, love bomb me, but then remind me that I wasn't worthy of it. And there was a lot of religious trauma tied into that too, where if I did anything that she deemed wrong or irritating, not even like wrong, but if I was just irritating, like, as a child, because children are irritating. I have one. I know. If I did anything that was irritating as a child, she would remind me that God has favorites, and if God did not love you enough, he would strike you out of his holy book of life, and you would spend the rest of your eternity post-death in hell, regardless of whether you were saved or not. So that was fun. Imagine telling that to your 8-year-old child, because I heard that a lot. Another fun thing I was often branded with, which maybe this was just a fun foreshadowing, I don't know, but was being called a witch. Things continued to get worse as I got older. My mom was very clearly unhappy all throughout my childhood. There was a lot of tension in the house all the time. I don't remember long periods of time where my parents were not screaming and fighting at each other, where they weren't at each other's throats, where they weren't, pitting me and my siblings against, like, in between the two of them. That was always happening. Anyway, there was a lot of that happened when I was just a kid. And again, because my childhood was so incredibly traumatic between her and my stepfather, it's hard to believe that both of your parents are terrible people. And I loved my mom, and she was the lesser of two evils. And when we did finally get out of that situation, she was the one that we ended up with. We all left together, and I still lived with her afterwards. And I don't know, there was probably some trauma bonding that happened post. And we'll get more into the more complexities of the relationships between me and my mom, because I'm just now realizing how much more, like, in-depth this is, and it would make for a really, really long video, and I don't want to subject you all to that in, like, one go. But it's been a lot to unpack. it has been a lot to unpack this last year specifically. I want to go back to and something I said earlier, which was for a long time, I forgave, I overlooked, and it took a lot for me to untangle myself from my mother's own trauma. We came out of domestic violence. That's what it was. And it was very difficult for me to separate that my mom was a victim, but my mom was also a perpetrator. And it felt wrong for me to attach any kind of blame or any kind of accountability to her because she was a victim. She clearly was. But she was also a perpetrator. And she subjected me to a lot. But it took me years and years and years to go through that. So I want to fast forward now a little bit to the present. In my adulthood, I still wanted to try and work it out with my mom. We had a lot of problems. And I already knew that my mom was a narcissistic person. I don't know if she thinks that she is, or if she, I don't know how she would feel about being labeled that, or if she would even acknowledge that about herself. I knew that she was, and I still wanted to try to make it work with her. The day that I found out I was pregnant, I promised myself that I wasn't going to put my kid through anything close to what I had been through. Not even just the abuse, but also having people in and out of my life. And I knew that my mom and her tendencies and her attributes in and of itself were going to be a something very hard to navigate and keep my kid safe and keep my kid emotionally safe. Even if my mother was no longer physically abusive, she was still emotionally abusive, and she was still emotionally manipulative. And I know it sounds terrible. These things are hard. They're hard to navigate. You need your parents. You want your parents, no matter what age you are. I didn't have a dad. I had a lousy stepdad. My mom was all I had left, and I desperately wanted to make it work. I wanted something good to have come out of this whole crappy situation. Around me, so many of my extended family relationships had just crumbled between the trauma, between just all of it was too much for people. And I just desperately wanted to make this last faction work. So I told my mom that we had to work on our relationship because I did not want I didn't want her to know about the past. I didn't want her to have an inkling of it. I didn't want any of it to touch her. Obviously she's going to find out someday, but I wanted to protect her for as long as possible. And I told my mom it's better for her to not know you at all than for her to know you and then have you ripped away because you did something stupid or because we can't make it work. And we agreed we were going to try to make it work. I was in therapy. It took me a couple tries to find a good therapist, but I was in active therapy after she was born. And my mom said that she was going to try and look for therapy. We tried for a while, after my daughter was born. And it was this pattern of, I thought my mom was getting better, and then she would just say something or do something, and I would realize that I was just being manipulated. I was just being sucked back in so that my mom could get something that she wanted, so that she could control the narrative or the direction, so that she could, so she could have this bubble or this idea, this projection, and have the world believe that she had this perfect family. But really, there was no actual work that was being done. In April of last year, I sat down with my mother for the last time. We met for coffee. And there'd been a lot of stuff that had happened in our family. And it was becoming a danger to my mental well-being and to my personal nuclear family. And so I sat down with her and I told her what my boundaries were and what could and could not come into our relationship. I said that she and I could have a relationship, but these were the boundaries of what could and could not be involved, and that if she was willing to, that we could work on that. After we had that coffee, I just felt like I felt in my bones that those were hard boundaries that were just not going to be able to be maintained and be able to be met. Because one of them was I was no longer going to be the peacekeeper of the family. I was not going to be the one that people could come to dump on anymore, because that was fundamentally my role in our family for years. If you are an oldest child, you also might be familiar with that. So that was one of the big ones. There were other ones, but that was one of the big ones. Throughout that summer, my health had significantly started to decline. I was going through a lot, and I did not really hear from my mother at all. And by I did not hear from my mother at all. I also did not go out of my way to contact her either. I had too much on my own plate. And to be honest, I was kind of scared to reach out. I was scared to be the first one to reach out and have those boundaries violated. So I just waited. I waited to see what would happen, and I didn't hear anything. I heard nothing. I was met with silence, and I felt abandoned and betrayed. And in that fall, my mother's birthday came up, and I went to go check her page to wish her happy birthday online. And I realized I was soft blocked on Facebook. And I went on to all of my other social media accounts, and I realized I was blocked on all of them. My mom didn't hear from me all summer. And instead of asking what was wrong or making sure that I was okay or reaching out, she just decided to block me because it was easier. Maybe because she knew it was just the time. There was no going back now. I had reached a point where these boundaries were hard stone walls that weren't going to be battered down this time. I don't know. In the end, at the time, it hurt really bad. And I was very upset. And I was so angry and I was frustrated because I honestly had wanted to be the one to block her first, because I wanted that. After all of the pain and suffering that my mother had put me through, I'd wanted to be the one to do that. And I hadn't made that first move because I had always still, even up until this point, wanted to give my mom the benefit of the doubt. Because even unto this point, I still loved my mom. After everything, after every horrible, nasty, terrible, abusive thing that my mother has done to me, I still loved her. And I still do love her. But from afar now. And she did me a favor, because in this year now, since I haven't spoken to her, I have put a lot of thought and a lot of perspective into our relationship and into our dynamic. And I see now how much my mom has taken from me and used me and controlled my story and controlled my narrative and controlled how I viewed the world. And well, I'm kind of over it. It's very scary to share this part because this is still very new. This part of my story is still very fresh. And Mom, if you see this and you watch it, I want you to know that I still think about you sometimes and I still care about you. but I hope I never see you again. And I hope that my daughter grows up, and I hope she doesn't remember you. And that will be the best peace I can ever have in this lifetime, I suppose. Anyway, this was this episode for Potions and Processing. It's been a year since I stopped talking to my mom. And it's gotten easier. So, happy anniversary to me, I guess. We'll dive more into it, but I really wanted to make a video for this because it felt momentous. It felt like a really big milestone. I didn't know how I would feel when I got here. I thought maybe I would feel grief or anger or happiness, maybe nothing. I guess I feel kind of everything, if that makes sense. Going no contact is hard, but here are some pointers I can give you. When you go no contact, do it 100%. No take backsies. That means don't look them up. Don't stalk them online. Don't ask people about them. As tempting as it is, and I know that that's hard, don't ask people about them. Completely remove yourself from the situation. And don't make yourself accessible to them through other people. This one can be kind of tricky, but if you have mutual friends or mutual family, you can politely ask that they not talk about you to whoever it is you are no longer talking to. And if they can't respect that, then maybe that relationship needs to be redefined too. I don't know. But if you have someone in your life that is causing you, extreme mental distress and harm, someone who means you ill will, maybe it's time to say goodbye. And I know that it can be really hard. I'm not a fan of cancel culture. I think that people can get better. I think people can make good choices. I think people can be forgiven and redeemed. But I also think that when people show you their true colors, that you should believe them. And I think that some people, they just don't want to change. And my mother is one of those people that I just don't think she wants to change. And in that case, there's no point for me to stay, because what's the point? In any case, this is the end of this episode. Thank you so much for sticking around with me. And please take care of yourself. Drink some water. Get outside. Touch some grass. Get some sunshine on your body. You need vitamin D. I need vitamin D. I'm severely vitamin D deficient. Enough so that I actually had to take like double extra mega portion supplement types. Anyways, remember, we may be different species, but we're all part of the same family. So please be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and I'll see you in the next video.